Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for May of 2019. I've got 11 albums to talk about this time, and I only got one request out of the way. I've still got 3 on the docket, and I'm hoping to get to those next month, but with all that introduction out of the way, let's dive in. I'll be honest, I was pretty hyped for Fishing for Fishes. I think that it was smart for King Gizzard to take last year off after putting so much shit out in 2017, that a lot of it was pretty quality. There were some lows, but there was a lot more highs and mids than outright disappointments. But Fishing for Fishes is exactly what I was hoping to get from King Gizzard on their return. Something that kind of is different for them, something more experimental than what they've done before, with a cool idea at its core. You know, a boogie swamp rock record with cyborgs. That's pretty neat. I'm gonna be honest, it's very intrinsically King Gizzard, but it's so up my alley. I like that concept alone, and it's I think it comes together on some tracks, the first leg of the record especially, like the first 5 songs, which is most of the record, is pretty solid. You know, I like the tight grooves, I like the harmonica playing. All the songs with Boogie in the title, I think, come together really, really well. But the guitar line on Boogeyman Sam actually reminds me of some shit from like ZZ Top. A lot of the atmosphere reminds me of that kind of southern swampy style, and the harmonica playing is great. I just feel like this album is a little undercooked. Like, even the songs that I do like, not all of them come to the same caliber on their more acclaimed releases or their previous records that I think are better than this. I think that the idea isn't fully realized as far as a cyborg swamp rock record. I feel like it comes together on a couple tracks, especially the closer, Cy Boogie, but I was hoping for more of that throughout the record, and I feel like it doesn't come together all that well to me personally from a performance perspective. Some of the writing does, but I feel like the performance should have been a little more robotic. I love the instrumentation on this thing personally, and I think the vocal performance is fine. I was just hoping for a little more with the concept that they pitched, and I think that it's alright, it's solid, it's the most okay rock album I've heard, or record in general that I've heard this year. I give this thing like a 6 out of 10. It's fun, it's got some fun grooves, some fun tight musicianship that's present on other King Gizzard records. I was just wanting a little more with this release personally.
It's what you thought that you wanted.
I was incredibly hyped for this record, as was a lot of the internet, you know? They had been a while since Modern Vampires, and Modern Vampires, like a lot of people seem to think, is Vampire Weekend's best record, especially in my opinion. It was my album of the year in 2013, still is. I mean, every revisit I give to that record, it just yields so much to me. I think that it's still a tight, great record that embodies and expands upon their earlier work perfectly, and it matures it in a great way. And some of that does occur more on Father of the Bride. They take the Modern Vampire sound and mature it just a little more. You know, the lyrical soundscape is still very indebted to Vampire Weekend, but the subject matter is a little different. It's a little more optimistic and bright in some instances, and some that it's not. My biggest issue with this record, because I don't think it's as good as Modern Vampires, but I do really enjoy this record. What is good here is phenomenal. You know, Harmony Hall. I personally really like both tracks with Steve Lacy and both tracks with Daniel Haim. I think their features are utilized fantastically, and I love the atmosphere of those songs, and they feel different than the ones on some of the other songs on the record. You guys know I love Harmony Hall. I geeked out about it when it dropped, and I still think that it's an amazing track that revitalizes some sounds from the early 90s that I fucking adore. Where I think this record kind of falls apart are on some of its shorter songs like Bambina and Big Blue, and 2021 especially. Like, I thought that was okay as an idea, as like a B-side, and I was hoping that it would fit better in the context of the record, and it kind of does. It makes sense following Flower Moon, but I still think that it's not the strongest cut on the record. Also, I was wrong. There's 3 features with Daniel Haim, and I do still love all of them, but there's a lot of inconsistencies in the track listing. Out of all the records I've heard this year, this is the one that I feel like is most needing of a redaction. Like, I feel like there's a lot that could be... A better record could be made out of this track listing. There's just a lot of fluff. There's a handful of filler in the middle of the record, and I feel like they were aiming to make something more ambitious and better than Modern Vampires. And while it's more ambitious, I would not say that it's better. It's still really good and on par with their earlier material to me, and I respect the more ambitious genre infusions that they tackle on this record, but I think that it just falls flat with some of the undercooked songs, like the shorter ones, or some of the more forgettable ones that happen in kind of the middle to beginning of the middle track listing, like Rich Man and My Mistake. I think those songs are okay, but they're no Sympathy. They're no Harmony Hall. They're no Jerusalem, New York, Berlin. Those are some of the great highlights on this record that aren't featured, or tracks that are featuring other artists. But I do still really like this thing. I seem to like it more than my contemporaries. I give this an 8 out of 10. It's a really good record to me personally. I think it's fucking great, and I'm happy with the product that we got ultimately at the end of the day. I checked this out because so many people in the community were in love with this thing. You know, Fantano called it one of the best pop-punk records of the decade. Crash also fucking praised it. Everybody seems to like this thing a lot. And I'm in the same vein. I love the writing on this thing. I think that it's very sharp and witty and self-aware in a great way. Shit like See You at Your Funeral and Sibling Rivalry and Full Blown Meltdown, all highlights to me. Great fucking songs. I think the performances on this record are raw, very personal feeling and emotional. I think the singer is fantastic, and I think that they interpolate pop punk ideas in a fresh feeling way. I love the run of this record. I think that it's just long enough. Like it keeps you in the misery just long enough for you to be satisfied with your experience. You know, it's tight. It's got a lot of energy in the best way possible. It doesn't feel saturated in a lot of the idiosyncrasies that I see in pop punk, both nowadays and when it was more popular a decade ago. This is definitely, out of the new age of pop punk, this is definitely one of the best records I've heard out of that sting. And I'm someone who's enjoyed a lot of the stuff that's come out from bands like Moose Blood and other bands like Knuckle Puck and Neck Deep. I think that Pup have brought together the best writing on this type of genre in a long time, and I fucking adore this thing. I give it an 8 out of 10. It's still not album of the year material to me personally, but I think that it is very tight, it's very fun, it's very, in a very sad kind of way. It's fun in a dark kind of way, and that's what I like about it. That's what I really like about revisiting this record. So I checked this record because I saw this guy live last year. He was an opening act for Remo Drive when I saw them in North Carolina with John and Hannah and Crash. And out of the four of us, I was the one that liked this guy the most. I loved his atmosphere of his live show. I thought it was really loose and very fun. I liked the kind of abstract way that he pulled together his set. It felt improvisational in a very controlled way, and he captures that fantastically on this record. I think a lot of the writing is very hipstery and West Coast, you know. I mean, there's a song in here called Henna Tattoo. If that's to ring anything to you as to what will invoke this record, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of earnestness in the lyrics too, though. Like the bottle's my lover, the bottle's my lover. She's just my friend. It feels very personal in a very intimate sort of way, and that intimacy that was in parts of his live show ring truer in a studio setting. You know, he still has that kind of beat tape sound on some of the percussion, which I also adored in the live setting, and his guitar playing is very personal and intimate, and his delivery is very heartfelt on a lot of this record. You know, he's not aiming to be this super catchy dude. He's just writing stuff that's very in tune with him, and that's what I love about it. It's very akin to one personality. You know, he is himself. He's not trying to be anybody else, and I respect him for that. I don't think that this is something that is going to be an album of the year for me personally, but as my entry point to his discography studio-wise, this is exactly what I was hoping would happen on a record because of how loose and free his set list was. He captured that perfectly. Songs kind of bleed into each other really, really well, even though they're all very intrinsically different from each other. And I love that about this. And I think that while I don't think it warrants as much excitement on repeated listens, that initial listen is very captivating. And a lot of the songwriting here is very heartfelt to me personally. And that's why I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. It's a good record, and it's a lot of fun. And it's also very intimate, which I also really appreciate.
I ain't just trying to get them off. Bobby would be quick to leave a bad bitch cut off. Like when you in the studio.
Put myself through some shit over the next couple of releases because I listened to both Logic records that dropped this year. And man, are they not good. You guys know how I feel about Logic. I'm not going to get into that as far as the talk about everything. I've had problems with his release schedule, but I will say that this feels, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind feels like the laziest Logic record to date. A lot of the instrumentals are very bland. A lot of his performances blur together, and a lot of the subject matter is this. All of the subject matter I've had issues with his projects in recent years, especially the Bobby Tarantino tapes. This reads like a shittier Bobby Tarantino, which probably is why he didn't put it under the Bobby Tarantino name. You know, he tries to be very personal with some of these lyrics, but they still sound very cocky and arrogant, and I'm just not a fan of that. You know, I think a lot of the features don't do anything for me either. I think that it's weird that he got Will Smith on a song, and Will Smith is like outperforming him in class when Logic is a more technically proficient rapper. It's a little weird. I didn't need to hear Logic's dad talk about how he came from his balls. I don't really care about that. I don't like Homicide. I think the hook is lazy, and I don't like Eminem's performance on it. It's better than Logic's, but it's still not. Crystal Lee is the best part of that song, and I don't need a song with both of the worst attributes of the two popular sides of rap on one song. I'm talking about the G-Eazy cut, because G-Eazy is the embodiment of shitty radio white rappers, and Logic is the embodiment of that bro-centric not backpack anymore, but that bro-centric, almost frat dude rap that I'm also very sick of. It's not as fake deep as his records, but that's because he's not even trying to go below surface level with his thoughts on here. I give this thing a 2 out of 10 because the instrumentals are at least decent at times, but it's still bland, boring, the worst Logic record by far.
I give you the world. I think this is
Outside of Supermarket, which sees Logic making a soundtrack for a book, which I get. I'm a writer. When I was trying to convince myself that I could write novels, I made playlists for the books I was writing. They're still around. I get it. But I would never make the music to my book. I think that that's an ambitious idea, and I praised it in my conversation about saturation of music, but the finished product is not good. This is the worst thing Logic has tied his name to, period. A lot of the instrumentals are so bland or disjointed. Like Bohemian Rhapsody's sudden modern style production doesn't fit. The invoking of Tribe Called Quest on Can I Kick It doesn't work. There's a song in here that has like a drum and bass breakdown, which I thought was interesting, but wasn't nearly of the same caliber as what was seen on Iridescence, the latest Brockhampton record. The Rick and Morty track, Lemon Drop, fucking sucks. This thing is just terrible. The Mac DeMarco song isn't any better, and that's coming from someone who isn't a Mac DeMarco stan, but at least respects the grind that he's put into his music. Logic just, he made something real special. This is a worst of the year contender for sure. If I were to give the album one modicum of praise, it's that some of the writing, the homages, or what I would assume were homages to Stephen King records or novels like Stand By Me, with imagery of finding bodies under the bridge and stuff like that, were nice to hear in a soundtrack to a book. You know, a lot of the writing, there's tracks where he's like stalking girls in supermarkets and that shit doesn't work. But the tracks where he talked about finding bodies under the bridge gave me some nice Stephen King feels in a not terrible way. So bad, it's not worth anybody's time. You know, I'm all for listening to shitty records because they'll at least invoke an experience, but this is akin to just running your hands on a chalkboard for 50 minutes. 1 out of 10, truly abhorrent experience, and I'm glad that it's behind me.
Core like earth, don't touch, don't go. Niggas might get bust.
On the complete opposite side of the musical spectrum, Tyler, the Creator, has actually made one of his most interesting releases today with Igor. When he announced this, I was excited. I didn't know if this was going to be a new era for Tyler. I didn't know if he was going to try anything new. I didn't know if he was just going to make Flower Boy 2.0. And he doesn't make Flower Boy 2.0. He more makes a companion piece to Flower Boy featuring a completely different character. While I personally wish Tyler was on the record more, this record more features Tyler just making production with different vocal uses and a handful of guests coded throughout this thing. I do appreciate when Tyler steps up front, sings or raps on here, like on Earthquake or New Magic Wand or What's Good, or on the closer Are We Still Friends, which is probably my favorite record on here. That song is so personal feeling and tight, and it invokes some heavy emotions. It's a heavy feeling song, and one that resonated with me more than anything else Tyler has ever done. You know, I love the R&B infused, soul infused production. I think that he matches it with some of his own production ideas perfectly. This is almost akin to Childish Gambino's last record to me personally. Like, I know a lot of people are kind of going to be calling out Kanye comparisons on here, especially since Kanye's on Puppet, and a lot of the production feels like Tyler's version of Life of Pablo. It also feels like Tyler's version of Awaken My Love, and I like this record more than both of those. I think it's tighter than those records. I think the production is different and very experimental for him and within the genre in general. He tackles this sound fantastically and makes something that is very abstract. It's almost akin to Earl Sweatshirt's last record, which is a lot more abstract than his previous records as well. But while I like the production on this more than Flower Boy, my biggest issue, and the one thing that personally to me sets it on par with Flower Boy, not below some of the accolades it's gotten, is because I wish Tyler were more of a vocal figurehead on this record. You know, not that he isn't, not that he's completely absent from it, because he's on here a lot. I just, with how different this sounds, I would have liked to have heard him more personally. But I do give this thing an 8. I think it's as good as Flower Boy, at least. And I think that it's, again, a good companion piece, because while Flower Boy seems very boisterous and uplifting and almost freeing, Igor seems like the complete opposite side of that without losing a lot of the personality and sound that came from Flower Boy. I actually really adore this record, and I feel like it'll be one that I keep revisiting throughout the year to see if it grows on me or not. While Rammstein wasn't my introduction to the German electronic scene, they were a band that I found in high school and I loved. I like their very unique way of making this type of metal music. While they have contemporaries that almost kind of mimic their sound, like Eisbrecher, I think that Rammstein have this very personal touch to their music that I think is hard to replicate, but down to their production, their keyboard sounds that they use, and Till Lindemann's vocal performance is something that is still very unique in the genre. I love their infusions of this kind of dramatic operatic performance with heavy guitars and very dancey electronic music. You know, it's a subgenre of music I know you all know I love. You guys know I love industrial music, and I think that this is a great return to form for them. I love Rammstein's early work, but I think that after Reise Reise, it does get a little, like, Rosenrot might be my least favorite record of theirs, and Liebe ist für Dalla isn't anything that I think better than anything that came before it, but this is certainly better than those two records for a large degree. I think it has a great run initially. I love Deutschland. I think that it's both lyrically and sonically just a phenomenal first single, and showcases that Rammstein haven't gone anywhere. And I liked Radio too. The keyboard line in that is really catchy, and I love the way that it sounds. And even Puppet, which is probably the most intense vocal performance that Till has given to this day with the band. I love the hook of that song. I love the drums, and I love the subdued nature of the chorus. I love that because there's this nice build-up that you're expecting in a Rammstein song. They strip it away and leave it to Till and the drums to just carry you into the chorus before the rest of the band comes in. It feels very personal, feels very intimate, and it feels so angry. His performance on that is probably my favorite out of the whole band's career. This album isn't perfect. I think Sex is probably my least favorite Rammstein song. I know they're a very sexual band. They have a lot of sexual lyrics both on this song and other parts of the record, but I don't like it for the same reason I didn't like Pussy on Liebe East, because it just feels lazy. It feels like they're on autopilot on a song like that, and that's why it just didn't resonate with me personally. But I think that it starts and it ends really well. I love the closure of this record. It feels like a very nice note to end the record out on, and I think that it leads into it really well. I like Tattoo. I think that it's a nice song, and I feel like it fits the fan base in a really pure kind of way, kind of like Sex does, but in a less, I don't know, watered down way to me personally. I think the guitars on some of the songs aren't as ironed out or as tight or as fitting as they are on other records of the career, earlier records of the career. But I think the electronics on here are great. I think a lot of the band is tight, and I think that they came back with something really, really good. I give this thing like a 7 out of 10. Phenomenal record, and I'm happy to see that if they do make anything else, they at least came back on the right foot. If this is their last record as well, I wouldn't be surprised, first off, but I think that it's a great way to end their career than Liebe East did 10 years ago. Another record that came out on May 17th that I was excited for, Carly Rae Jepsen's follow-up to Emotion, a record that I and the internet really adore. I think that it put Carly Rae in a different atmosphere than her previous two records, and I think it's one that embodies her personality a little better and her writing a little better. And Dedicated is the kind of follow-up I was expecting. It's still very retro sounding, it's still very old school with some modern twists. I feel like this, at least to me, is as good as Emotion. It is still very fun, very boisterous, and very bright and sugary in sound and in songwriting. A lot of the songs on here feel very positive and fun and romantic. I feel like this also has some of the same follies as Emotion. While it's a shorter record, if I'm not mistaken, it still feels a little lengthy.
I do think that she improved upon the pacing of a record by trimming fat from Dedicated, but there's still tracks in the tail end of the record and kind of the beginning of the tail end of the record that aren't as strong as the first half. But I think that because the record has less of this huge ceiling-breaking sound and it's a little more downplayed atmospherically, its low points feel that much more monotonous as a result.
I think it starts off strong, like Emotion did. I don't think it's as strong. I don't think Julian is nearly as good as Runaway With Me, but it sets the stage for the record in the same way that Runaway With Me did. Runaway With Me was very bright and big. It was huge, colossal in sound. You know, everything on there, from the synths to the punchiness in the drums to the saxophone, was very upfront and forward and felt like a summer getaway. Whereas Julian, while still big and bright and poppy, is a little more subdued. And that's probably the best way to describe this record. It's a much more subdued Emotion. You know, tracks like I Want You in My Room have this kind of herky-jerky chorus that's more in line with the styles that she's aiming for. And I think she captures it perfectly on tracks like that. But songs like Everything He Needs don't do anything for me. I hate the hook of that song. I love the groove. I love the sound. I hate that chorus. And I feel like it embodies some of my issues with the record. I feel like it feels a little flat. You know, everything kind of sounds gray and muddled, kind of like the album cover. But there's not every song like that. I just feel like tracks like I'll Be Your Girl also didn't do a whole lot for me. Or even some of the songs at the tail end of the record, like Right Words, Wrong Time, or Real Love. Not terrible by any stretch of the imagination, but feel less impactful than other tracks on the record, like Too Much or Automatically in Love, or even the closer Party for One. You know, it's just those kind of inconsistencies that were present on Emotion just carry over into Dedicated. That's why I'm giving it the same score I gave Emotion, a 7 out of 10. Still a solid fucking record, and I'm happy that Carly Rae kept her momentum strong after a brief break from music. Still great, still fun, still solid, still love the retro sound and some of the vocoded vocals, and some of her hook work is still so earwormy and sugary, but just, I don't know. Could have used a little cutting down, could have used a little trimming, could have used a little better, arranging of some of the mixes personally.
So set the bar too low. You born in 85, I told your girl you bout to blow. You blew like 85, I told your
Reserve is out now, also released on the same day as the other three. This was a record that I was excited about. I wouldn't say I'm super versed in Injury Reserve's previous material, but I've heard some of it, and I like it a lot. I like their chemistry, I like their sound, I like that they evolve their sound across projects. They don't, tie themselves down to one idea. I respect that. And on this record, they seem to do the same thing. They inject some really European-feeling sounds on this record, The production on tracks like GTFU and Jailbreak the Tesla, which is a fucking banger. I know I've always kind of harped on bangers, and, I feel like I portray as someone who hates just vibrant, bouncy, fun songs. Not the case, and Jailbreak the Tesla is a perfect example as to one that I think works to me personally. I love the instrumental on it. I love the nature of the song. I love how hype it just gets me. It's a great, well-produced song. And the record itself, in general, is well-produced. There's a lot of varied types of instrumentation that stay under the same umbrella. I think the chemistry seen on the previous releases is here in full spades. I love a lot of the features on here. I think Amine is hilarious on Jailbreak the Tesla. I love Jawbreaker. I love the features on Jawbreaker, too. Oh, such a good song, and a great one to follow Corona and Lime, which was a really smooth opener for the record. I think that this record starts better than it finishes.
Not to discredit the featureless songs, I mean, Gravy and Biscuits is my shit. What a Year It's Been is still so fucking good. Whenever they strip back the features and just keep the production varied, it's still excellent as hell.
And I think that they were smart with how it was paced. It's not all great. I think that the interludes are passable, they're whatever, and I feel like because of the lack of consistency in true excellent songs in the second half of the record, that it's just more kind of solid and plays it a little safe. It detracts from the record a little bit to me personally. I do still like it a lot, though. I think it's really good, and I think that for them to make this their major label debut, this is the best foot to start off for them personally, I think. I've heard worse. I've heard better, but I've heard worse. I give this a 7 out of 10. Really solid record. A lot of fun. And the last record up for discussion today is the record Apoptosis from Allegaeon, which was a request by Random Rock and Real Wrestling Reviews. And it's solid. It's a good record. It's well produced. They're a technical death metal act with some solo work that's very reminiscent of the progressive metal ideals that is seen a lot in metal nowadays, and it has the production of a tech death release. It's very brash, it's very bold, it's very abrasive, with a lot of sharp bass work. The bass work on here is also really tight. It's also really flashy. Every band member has a pocket to fill, and they fill it really well. The vocals on here are brittle. They're fucking harsh and dense and fit the soundscape they're aiming for very, very well. This is better than the Fallujah record, but it's of the same ilk. This actually would have been a better way for that band, Fallujah, to sound on a record following Dreamless if they wanted to follow it up with something a little more dense and a little more brash. The solo work on here isn't as flashy as Dreamless. I think that's a little idiosyncratic of the genre. It's very kind of bland and samey and just underwhelming to me personally. Where I think this record excels is when it's being brash and angry and forward up front with its anger. It's fine, it's flashy in a lot of the right ways. I just think that they could have done better with their solo work and maybe a little better to vary things up across the track listing. It gets a little samey at points in a very derivative sort of way, but it's still a solid release. It's not the worst thing I've heard. I appreciate the aggression presented here, and I appreciate the aggro nature of this record. And again, it's a better version of other records that I've heard this year that have let me down personally. So I give it a 6 out of 10. You know, it's a solid record. It's nothing that I would say is outright terrible. It just could use with some retooling of some of its ideas personally. And that was the month. That was May. I almost said June, but May. Like I said, I have some requests on the docket if it's something that you would like to request, or if you want to look at the listening log to see what I'm currently listening to, or what is on the docket, feel free to check it out. It's linked in the description. But I'm going to get out of here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for the support on here and on Patreon. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have been Idiots, Laughs, and Situations, and I'll see you another day.